You think 1960s black mothers were just making do with whatever they had? Think again. These women turned humble ingredients into dishes so good that children actually begged for seconds, thirds, and packed lunches. From cast iron skillets to Sunday tables, these 60 forgotten meals kept families fed, happy, and connected to heritage. Let's dig into the cheap dishes that made the 1960s unforgettable. Cocktail meatballs simmered in grape jelly and chili sauce created sweet, savory bites that children couldn't resist, the glossy sauce coating each meatball like candy while delivering unexpected flavors. Mothers would brown frozen meatballs in skillets before transferring them to slow cookers or pots where they simmered in a mixture of grape jelly and bottled chili sauce that melted together into a thick, shiny glaze. The combination sounded strange but tasted magical, the grape jelly's sweetness balancing the chili sauce's tang and creating a flavor profile that kept people reaching for more. As the meatballs simmered, they absorbed the sauce and became tender, the exterior developing a sticky coating that made them perfect for spearing with toothpicks. In black households during the 1970s, these cocktail meatballs represented easy elegance, a recipe that seemed fancy but required minimal effort. Children loved them because they were bite-sized, required no cutting, and tasted like a sweet, savory treat. Banana pudding with wafers was the chilled Christmas treasure children could barely wait for, especially when they knew it had been sitting in the fridge all night, getting better by the hour. Mothers layered vanilla wafers, sliced bananas, and warm homemade pudding in deep glass dishes, each layer sinking just slightly as the wafers softened into cake-like sweetness. The bowl went into the refrigerator covered tightly, and from that moment on, children opened the fridge door every 20 minutes just to look. By the next day, the pudding had turned silky, the bananas had sweetened, and the wafers had transformed into soft, creamy layers that tasted like pure comfort. When the dish was lifted out for Christmas dinner, everyone leaned in closer, waiting for the spoon to reveal that first perfect scoop. The smell alone, warm vanilla and banana, felt like a holiday hug. It was the dessert that never lasted long because children asked for seconds before their plates even touched the table. Banana pudding tasted like patience rewarded, Christmas excitement, and the magic of a dessert that only got better overnight. Soya grits and ground beef skillet dinners were a product of the government era, when soy-based foods were sent to low-income households to stretch meat supplies. Mothers browned a small amount of beef, added the soya grits, and seasoned everything until it tasted far richer than it looked. Sometimes a handful of onions or peppers went in, or a bit of leftover broth to deepen the flavor. The mixture thickened into a hearty skillet meal that fed many children at once. Kids did not always know what was in it, but they knew it filled them up and tasted good with bread or rice. It had a creamy, savory texture that surprised families the first time they tried it. Mothers relied on it because it was reliable, cheap, and easy to adapt. Soya grits and ground beef skillets were resourcefulness at its most practical, proof that mothers could turn even government-issued ingredients into comfort. Smoked frog legs provided unexpected protein from the marshes and bayous surrounding many southern plantations. Skilled foragers caught frogs at night with simple nets or by hand, cleaning the meaty hind legs and seasoning them with salt and wild herbs before smoking them slowly over hickory coals. The gentle smoke preserved the meat for days and gave it a rich, savory flavor that paired well with cornbread or greens. This practice echoed West African traditions of smoking small game and fish to ensure longevity in hot climates. After emancipation, smoked frog legs remained a regional delicacy in Louisiana and coastal communities, later becoming a celebrated dish in Cajun cuisine. They remind us that survival often required deep familiarity with the waterways and a willingness to turn overlooked resources into sustaining meals. Smoked frog legs stand as an example of how necessity and skill created flavors that outlasted hardship, transforming what began as a pragmatic hunt into a distinctive part of Southern culinary heritage and a taste still enjoyed today. Homemade cane. Syrup drizzle once gave biscuits and pancakes a dark, smoky sweetness unmatched by refined sugar. Families would harvest sugarcane, crush the stalks, and boil the juice in large iron kettles until it thickened into a rich amber syrup. The work was hot and sticky, often stretching from dawn until late night, but the reward was a flavor that defined Southern breakfasts and holiday treats. Children watched the bubbling kettles with wide eyes, waiting for a chance to taste the warm syrup on a fresh biscuit. Neighbors often shared the labor and the finished product, turning the syrup-making into a community event as well as a culinary one. Over time, industrial sweeteners and store-bought syrups replaced the careful craft, and the knowledge of how to coax sweetness from cane faded with older generations. For those who remember, a spoonful of homemade cane syrup is more than a taste. It is a memory of family unity, hard work, and the sweetness that perseverance can bring. Sweet rice pudding with raisins was the dessert that turned a handful of leftover rice into something that felt like a gift at the Christmas table. Mothers heated the rice slowly with milk, sugar, butter, and warm spices until it thickened into a creamy, fragrant pot that sent comfort drifting through the kitchen. Raisins, often saved for holidays, were stirred in last, plumping into soft little bursts of sweetness. Children loved watching them swell and surface, treating each spoonful like a treasure hunt. The pudding tasted warm, gentle, and deeply soothing, the kind of dessert you ate slowly just to make the moment last. For families with little money, this dish proved that creativity mattered more than ingredients. Mothers knew it filled hungry stomachs and warmed cold winter mornings, stretching what they had into something memorable. It was served in bowls passed around the table, steaming and sweet, with cinnamon dusted lightly over the top when the budget allowed. Everyone from the youngest child to the oldest grandparent took comfort in its familiar taste. Long after the holidays, people remembered how rice pudding made the house smell like cinnamon and hope. Sweet rice pudding with raisins tasted like warmth, resourcefulness, and Christmas sweetness created from almost nothing. Cream cheese and olive pinwheels, made with softened cream cheese mixed with chopped green olives and rolled in tortillas, created tangy, savory bites. Children found intriguing. Aunties would soften cream cheese and mix it with finely chopped green olives, pimentos, and sometimes a touch of garlic powder, spreading the mixture evenly on flour tortillas. The tortillas were rolled tightly, wrapped in plastic, and refrigerated for hours to firm up before being sliced into colorful pinwheels. Each slice revealed swirls of white cream cheese dotted with green olive pieces, creating visual appeal that drew children's attention. In 1970s, Black households, these pinwheels represented creative entertaining, showing how simple ingredients could become elegant appetizers. Children loved them because they were fun to look at, easy to eat, and introduced them to olives in a creamy format that made the vegetables more approachable and less intimidating than eating them whole. Crispy fried bologna steaks were the kind of meal Black children in the 1960s grew up begging for, even though the ingredients cost next to nothing. Mothers cut the bologna thicker than usual, scoring the edges so the slices would not curl too much in the heat. As soon as the meat hit the skillet, it sizzled loudly, releasing a smell that made every child's stomach growl. Some mothers fried onions in the same pan, letting the sweetness mix with the salty meat. The edges crisped up perfectly, turning golden and just a little chewy. Served on soft white bread or with a side of rice, the meal felt like more than the sum of its parts. Kids loved watching the slice puff and tighten in the pan before collapsing back into shape. Mothers loved how quick, cheap, and dependable the dish was. Fried bologna steaks were simple, but they tasted like a treat made just for the children who crowded around the stove. Mulberry leaf wraps transformed young, tender leaves from the wild mulberry tree into clever edible packages. Foragers selected the freshest leaves in spring when they were soft and mild, then blanched them briefly to soften their texture. Cooked rice, seasoned vegetables, or small bits of preserved fish were spooned inside before the leaves were folded and steamed, creating tidy bundles filled with subtle, earthy flavor. This technique echoed African traditions of wrapping foods in leaves for both cooking and preservation, blending seamlessly with indigenous American practices. The result was a portable meal that required no extra containers and made use of a tree that also provided sweet berries later in the season. After emancipation, mulberry leaves continued to appear in Southern folk remedies and tea blends, but the memory of leaf-wrapped suppers remains a quiet testament to ingenuity. Mulberry leaf wraps illustrate how a single plant could meet many needs, offering nourishment, flavor, and practicality to communities that transformed every part of their environment into sustenance. Collard green potlikker soup captured the very essence of slow cooking and careful stewardship. After hours of simmering collard greens with smoked meat, the broth left in the pot was a mineral-rich elixir, treasured as much as the greens themselves. Families poured this flavorful liquid into bowls and sipped it with pieces of cornbread, believing it to restore strength and spirit after long days of work. Some added hot pepper vinegar for a lively kick, while others preferred it plain and soothing. Children learned early never to throw away the potlikker, understanding that its nutrients were too valuable to waste. Neighbors often shared jars with the sick or elderly, turning the simple broth into a gesture of care and healing. Modern kitchens may overlook this tradition, discarding the liquid without thought, but for those who remember, the taste of potlikker carries the memory of community generosity and the wisdom of using every drop the garden and the kitchen could provide. Cranberry orange gelatin mold was the festive centerpiece that sparkled under holiday lights, sitting proudly in its familiar metal mold on Christmas tables throughout the 1960s. Mothers mixed cranberry sauce, orange zest, sugar, and gelatin, pouring the mixture into molds shaped like rings, wreaths, or holiday designs. When it chilled overnight, it emerged glossy and jewel-toned, firm enough to hold its shape, but soft enough to melt on the tongue. Children loved the wobble, tapping the plate lightly just to see it jiggle before taking a bite. The flavor balanced tart cranberry with bright citrus, making it refreshing alongside heavier holiday dishes. Mothers appreciated that it required few ingredients, stretched far, and looked impressive without costing much. It added color to plates filled with greens, dressing, and meats, offering a sweet note between savory bites. Crab cakes formed into mini patties were seafood luxury that made Thanksgiving feel extra special. The sweet crab meat mixed with breadcrumbs and seasonings before being pan-fried until golden. Grandmothers would pick through cans of crab meat to remove any shell pieces, then gently fold the delicate meat with beaten eggs, breadcrumbs, mayonnaise, mustard, Old Bay seasoning, and sometimes diced bell peppers. The mixture was formed into small patties, each one handled carefully, then refrigerated briefly to help them hold together during cooking. The crab cakes were pan-fried in butter until golden brown on both sides, the exterior developing a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and packed with sweet crab flavor. In the 1970s, Black households, crab cakes represented coastal sophistication, bringing seafood traditions to holiday tables and elevating the appetizer spread. Children loved mini crab cakes because they felt fancy, tasted sweet rather than fishy, and came in sizes perfect for young appetites. Fried mackerel fillets were the fish dinner families depended on when fresh fish was too expensive, but canned or inexpensive mackerel could still be bought. Mothers seasoned the fillets lightly, dipped them in cornmeal, and fried them until the edges crisped and the center stayed flaky. Sometimes they added a squeeze of lemon or a dash of hot sauce if they had it, but even plain, the fish was flavorful enough to satisfy hungry children. The sizzling sound from the skillet made every child drift into the kitchen. Served with rice or bread, the fillets stretched surprisingly far. Mothers often cooked extra rice just to make sure the fish fed everyone, and somehow it always did. They smelled salty and rich, like a small celebration, even on an ordinary night. Kids ate them with big smiles, enjoying how the crisp coating cracked under their teeth. Fried mackerel fillets were the taste of the ocean made affordable through skill, not money. Pine needle tea offered a bright and restorative drink when fresh produce was scarce during cold months. Enslaved foragers collected the youngest green needles from longleaf and loblolly pines, rinsed them carefully, and steeped them in hot water until the brew released a light citrus aroma. Rich in vitamin C, this tea helped ward off scurvy and brought a welcome freshness to winter diets heavy with salt-preserved foods. The practice echoed both indigenous traditions and West African herbal knowledge, merging two continents' wisdom into a single sustaining cup. Families continued to brew pine needle tea well after emancipation, and it remains popular among modern herbalists for its gentle flavor and reputed immune-boosting qualities. Its evergreen scent and warm golden color remind us that even in the most barren season, the forest offered nourishment. Pine needle tea illustrates how observing the land and respecting its cycles allowed people to find both medicine and comfort, turning what others overlooked into a sustaining daily ritual that strengthened body and spirit alike. Homemade crackling bread filled kitchens with the savory perfume of pork fat and toasted cornmeal. Families saved every scrap of rendered pork skin, frying it until crisp and then folding the cracklings into cornbread batter rich with buttermilk and a touch of lard. Baked in a well-seasoned skillet, the bread emerged with a crisp crust and pockets of salty crunch that delighted children and elders alike. It was a dish born of necessity, ensuring nothing from the hog went to waste, but it also became a treat that people looked forward to at Sunday dinners. Neighbors often traded cracklings after a hog killing, turning the preparation into a social event that celebrated thrift and flavor. Today, store-bought cornbread mixes rarely capture the depth or texture of the old-style cracklin' bread, and few families still render their own pork. For those who have tasted it, the memory of that smoky, savory slice remains a reminder of community resourcefulness and the joy of making something extraordinary from humble ingredients. Fried catfish. Christmas Eve dinner was a Southern tradition children counted down to every year, circling the kitchen the moment they heard oil popping in the pan. Mothers dredged the fillets in seasoned cornmeal, shaking off the excess before laying them gently in hot oil that smelled like celebration. The fish crisped quickly, turning golden and fragrant, filling the house with a scent so comforting it felt like part of the season itself. Children crowded around the table grabbing for the crispiest pieces, blowing on their fingers when the fish was still too hot to touch but refusing to wait. It was a meal that felt festive without needing many ingredients, one that tasted like Southern pride and holiday joy served with laughter. Fried catfish tasted like tradition celebration and a Christmas Eve that always felt special, the kind of night that lived in memory long after childhood ended. Spinach dip, served with crackers and vegetables, was creamy, savory goodness that children scooped up enthusiastically. The rich cream cheese and sour cream base mixed with chopped spinach and seasonings, creating dips that tasted indulgent. Aunties would thaw frozen chopped spinach and squeeze out all the excess water before mixing it with softened cream cheese, sour cream, mayonnaise, dried vegetable soup mix, and sometimes water chestnuts for added crunch. The mixture was stirred together until smooth and well combined, then refrigerated for several hours to allow flavors to meld and develop depth. Some families served the dip cold, while others baked it briefly to create warm, bubbling cheese pulls that made every scoop exciting. In 1970s, Black households, spinach dip represented modern entertaining, recipes that came from package instructions but became beloved traditions. Children loved spinach dip because the vegetables were hidden in creamy richness, making them willing to eat greens. Stewed cabbage with onions and pepper was the kind of Christmas side dish that proved you did not need expensive ingredients to make something delicious and comforting. Black mothers in the 1960s knew how to coax flavor out of the simplest vegetables, turning cabbage into a dish that warmed the whole table. They sliced the cabbage into soft ribbons, letting it fall into a pot with onions, a little oil, and black pepper that bloomed the moment it touched the heat. As it simmered, the cabbage softened slowly, absorbing every bit of flavor until the whole pot smelled humble and familiar in the best way. Children might not have rushed toward cabbage the way they rushed toward pie or ham, but they always scooped some onto their plates because mothers seasoned it so well. Stewed cabbage was tender, savory, and soothing, the kind of dish you paired with anything else on the plate. It was a reminder that holiday food did not need to be fancy to carry meaning. It stretched far, fed many, and tasted like home cooking shaped by patience and love. Even families with tight budgets could rely on this dish to fill the table without sacrifice. Years later, people who grew up with it remember the gentle aroma, the way steam rose from the pot. and the feeling of being cared for by hands that always made the most of what they had. Stewed cabbage with onions and pepper tasted like comfort, resourcefulness, and the quiet heart of Christmas dinner. Rice and gravy plates were the kind of dinner that proved a single pan of drippings could be stretched into something that tasted far richer than it cost. After frying chicken or pork, mothers saved every drop of fat left in the skillet, scraping up the brown bits stuck to the bottom. They sprinkled a little flour into the pan, stirring slowly until it turned the right shade of brown, then added water or broth to build the gravy. Onions went in if the family had any, softening down until they melted into the sauce. Meanwhile, a pot of rice bubbled on the stove, its steam fogging up the windows on cold evenings. When everything was done, mothers spooned the gravy over big mounds of rice, letting it soak through every grain until the plate was heavy, warm, and comforting. Children loved how the gravy seeped to the edges, turning simple rice into something that felt complete. It was a meal built from scraps, but it never tasted that way. Rice and gravy plates were the quiet heroes of weeknight dinners, turning leftovers into nourishment. Elderflower cordial brought delicate sweetness and subtle healing to kitchens that often lacked sugar and fruit. When elder shrubs burst into fragrant clusters in early summer, gatherers clipped the blossoms and steeped them in water with a touch of honey or sorghum to create a lightly floral syrup. This cordial could be sipped as a soothing drink, stirred into simple desserts, or used as a gentle remedy for coughs and fevers. The method reflected old-world European customs while blending with African-American herbal practice, showing how cultures met in the shared search for flavor and wellness. Long after emancipation, elderflower cordial remained a quiet luxury in rural households, prized for its refreshing taste during hot southern days. Today, it reappears in cocktails and artisanal sodas, but its roots lie in careful foraging and centuries of folk medicine. Elderflower cordial proves that even in times of want, people found ways to capture the fleeting perfume of summer and preserve it for moments of calm and celebration. Cheese ball rolled in pecans sat proudly on serving platters surrounded by crackers, its cream cheese base mixed with cheddar, green onions, and seasonings before being shaped into a perfect sphere and coated with chopped pecans. Aunties would soften cream cheese and mix it with shredded sharp cheddar, finely chopped green onions, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, and sometimes hot sauce for complexity. The mixture was then shaped into a ball or log, wrapped in plastic, and chilled until firm enough to handle. Just before serving, the cheese ball was rolled in finely chopped pecans that created a crunchy, nutty coating contrasting beautifully with the creamy interior. In 1970s Black households, cheese balls represented sophistication and effort, centerpieces of appetizer spreads that showed guests the host had put thought into the gathering. Children loved them because they could spread the cheese themselves onto crackers, feeling grown-up and independent. Collard greens with smoked turkey tails were the Christmas pot that simmered for hours, filling the entire house with a smell so familiar and comforting that children knew exactly what day it was before anyone said a word. Mothers washed the greens leaf by leaf, removing stems and tearing them into pieces so tender they practically melted after cooking. The smoked turkey tails went into the pot first, releasing their flavor slowly into the broth until the kitchen filled with that unmistakable smoky scent. When the greens finally joined, they simmered until silky and rich, soaking up every bit of seasoning. Children dipped bread into the potlikker when mothers were not looking, because the broth tasted just as good as the greens. This dish felt like home, history, and holiday all at once. No matter how tight the budget was, collard greens with smoked turkey tails made the table feel whole, reminding families that Christmas was about flavor, family, and tradition shared across generations. Collard greens tasted like warmth, love, and the comfort of knowing good food would always bring people together. Smothered pork neck bones over rice were the kind of dinner that filled a home with slow-built comfort long before anyone sat down at the table. Pork neck bones were among the cheapest pieces you could buy, but they held more flavor than most people expected. Mothers browned them deeply in a heavy skillet, scraping up every bit of seasoning stuck to the bottom before adding onions, garlic, and water to create a rich gravy. The pot simmered for hours, bubbling quietly while the meat softened and released its flavor into the broth. Kids wandered through the kitchen pretending they were not checking on dinner, but everyone knew the smell alone could pull you from any room in the house. When the gravy thickened just right, mothers poured it over big bowls of rice, letting the grains soak in every drop. The neck bones were tender enough to slip from the bone, the gravy warm and savory, the rice filling and grounding. No one cared that the dish was made from scraps or cheap cuts. Smothered pork neck bones over rice tasted like love stretched across a tight budget, a warm promise that everyone would eat well that night. Ground kudzu root paste emerged when conventional flours were scarce and starchy substitutes were needed to thicken stews or stretch breads. Kudzu, an invasive vine introduced from Asia, sent deep roots into the southern soil that stored abundant starch. Enslaved gatherers dug these roots, washed and dried them, then pounded them into a fine powder. Mixed with water, the powder formed a paste that thickened soups or acted as a binder for cornmeal cakes. Its mild flavor and reliable texture made it a quiet but important ingredient in times of scarcity. After emancipation, some rural families continued to harvest kudzu for its starch, and today herbalists still value it for its medicinal qualities. Ground kudzu root paste shows how knowledge of local plants and persistence in foraging allowed cooks to replace costly ingredients with what the land freely offered, turning an aggressive vine into a vital pantry staple, and demonstrating again how necessity inspired both culinary creativity and a deeper understanding of the southern landscape's hidden gifts. Cowpea and collard stew combined two powerhouse ingredients that sustained countless families through hard times. Field peas, also known as cowpeas, were simmered slowly with smoky meat and joined by hearty collard greens, creating a dish rich in protein, vitamins, and earthy flavor. The long cooking process filled homes with an aroma that signaled comfort and nourishment. Farmers valued cowpeas for their ability to thrive in poor soil, while collards offered leaves long after other vegetables had withered. Together, they made a meal that cost little but fed many, reflecting a tradition of resourcefulness and care. Mothers and grandmothers seasoned the pot with onions, garlic, and pepper, each adding a personal touch passed down through generations. Families gathered around the table with slices of cornbread to soak up the flavorful broth, finding strength in every spoonful. Though supermarkets now offer endless choices, the slow-simmered union of cowpeas and collards stands as a reminder of a time when simple ingredients created enduring nourishment. Miniature cornbread muffins with honey butter were golden gems that children popped into their mouths whole, the crumbly cornbread texture melting while sweet honey butter added richness. Mothers would prepare cornbread batter using stone-ground cornmeal, flour, eggs, buttermilk, and just enough sugar to balance the corn's natural earthiness, then spoon it into mini muffin tins that baked quickly. The muffins emerged from ovens with crispy, slightly caramelized tops and tender, crumbly interiors that begged to be broken open and slathered with butter. Honey butter was made by whipping softened butter with honey until fluffy and smooth, creating a spread that melted instantly when slathered on hot muffins. In the 1970s, Black households, these miniature cornbread muffins represented Southern hospitality in bite-sized form. Children loved them because they were individually portioned, making them feel like special treats rather than ordinary bread, and the sweet honey butter made every bite feel indulgent and special. Fried chicken. Christmas platters appeared in homes where a full turkey or ham was too expensive, proving that Christmas was about flavor, not price tags. Mothers seasoned each piece carefully, using spices they knew by heart, fried them until perfectly crisp, and served them on big platters that vanished in minutes. Children grabbed legs and wings with both hands, laughing through every crunchy bite as steam rose from the fresh pieces. The smell of seasoned chicken drifting through the house made the whole day feel like a celebration. For many families, fried chicken was the centerpiece they could count on, a dish that felt festive no matter the circumstances. Fried chicken at Christmas tasted like joy, pride, and the power of skill and love to create a holiday feast from whatever was available. Okra and tomato skillet dinners were a celebration of what could be grown, canned, or shared when grocery money was scarce. Okra came from backyard gardens or neighbors who always had extra to give canned tomatoes added brightness and acidity that turned the dish into something filling and hearty. Mothers seasoned it with onions, garlic, and pepper, letting the vegetables stew down until they became thick and deeply flavored. Sometimes a pinch of sugar or paprika went in, just to balance the tang or add warmth. The skillet hissed softly as everything cooked, filling the room with the smell of tomatoes and earth. Sometimes it was served over rice, sometimes with cornbread, and sometimes as the meal all on its own. Children learned early that vegetables could carry a dinner when meat was not part of the budget. They would scoop big spoonfuls onto their plates, pleased by how comforting and familiar it tasted. Okra and tomato skillet meals were proof that survival could still taste good. Ground pumpkin seed. Porridge transformed leftover seeds into a hearty meal that supplied both protein and healthy oils. After pumpkins were cooked for pies or stews, the seeds were washed, dried, and pounded into a coarse meal. This meal was simmered slowly in water or thin milk, creating a creamy porridge with a subtle nutty flavor. Sweetened lightly with honey or molasses when available, it became a sustaining breakfast or evening dish that used every part of the harvest. The method reflected West African culinary traditions where ground seeds thickened soups and stews, showing how transplanted knowledge enriched American foodways. Generations after emancipation, pumpkin seed porridge remained a seasonal specialty in some rural areas, appreciated for its nourishing qualities and gentle taste. Modern cooks might recognize it in contemporary seed-based milks and cereals, proving that this centuries-old practice still influences how we eat today. Ground pumpkin seed. Porridge highlights the wisdom of never wasting what nature provides and celebrates a heritage of careful resourcefulness that continues to inspire. Sorrel hibiscus tea brought a ruby glow to church socials and summer porch gatherings. Its tart floral flavor, steeped from dried hibiscus petals and sweetened with cane sugar, reflected Caribbean influences that African American families carried north and west during migrations. Grandmothers brewed the tea in large enamel pots, sometimes adding a hint of ginger or a squeeze of lime to brighten the taste. Children watched the deep red liquid swirl into pitchers, knowing it signaled a special occasion. Served chilled over cracked ice in simple glasses, sorrel tea cooled guests during humid evenings while hymns and laughter filled the air. The drink offered more than refreshment. It was a quiet connection to ancestors and homelands across the sea. Over time, soda and store-bought beverages replaced the careful steeping of petals and spices, and the vibrant tradition faded in many communities. Those who still make it treasure the deep crimson reminder of resilience and shared history that once colored every celebration. Canned salmon croquettes were one of the most beloved budget dinners because they turned a cheap can of fish into something that felt almost fancy. Mothers mixed the salmon with onions, cornmeal or breadcrumbs, eggs, and simple seasonings, shaping the mixture into patties. When they hit the hot skillet, the croquettes sizzled loudly, signaling that dinner would be crisp and golden. The outside browned beautifully, while the inside stayed soft and savory. Sometimes mothers squeezed in a bit of lemon or added chopped peppers when they had extra ingredients, elevating the dish even further. Served with rice, potatoes, or plain bread, the croquettes stretched one can far enough to feed several children. The smell drifted through the house, making everyone hungry long before the meal was served. Kids especially loved the way the crispy coating gave way to the tender filling. Canned salmon croquettes were frugality turned into celebration. Salmon croquettes with lemon were the Christmas treat families made when fresh fish was far too expensive, proving once again that Black mothers in the 1960s could create celebration from whatever they had. Canned salmon was cheap, dependable, and always waiting in the cupboard for special meals. Mothers mixed it with breadcrumbs, onions, eggs, and seasoning, shaping patties that sizzled the moment they hit the hot skillet. The outside crisped into a golden shell while the inside stayed tender, savory, and full of comforting flavor. A squeeze of lemon over the top made the croquettes taste bright and festive, like something far fancier than their ingredients suggested. Children begged for them as soon as the smell filled the house, crowding the kitchen doorway and asking how much longer until they were ready. These croquettes felt like a gift, especially when paired with rice, grits, greens, or dressing. Mothers loved the dish because it stretched a single can into enough patties for several children, filling stomachs without draining the holiday budget. Every bite tasted like care seasoned with creativity. Years later, adults remembered the crisp edges, the steam rising from the center, and the little splash of lemon that made the flavors sing. Salmon croquettes with lemon tasted like celebration crafted from skill, not cost. Cocktail sausages wrapped in flaky biscuit dough emerged from ovens as golden crescents that children grabbed from cooling racks, burning their fingers but unable to wait. Mothers would roll out refrigerated biscuit dough, cutting it into strips before wrapping each small sausage like a tiny gift and arranging them on greased baking sheets. The wrapped sausages baked until the dough turned golden brown and flaky, the fat from the sausages creating pockets of rich, meaty flavor. Some families brushed the tops with melted butter and sesame seeds before baking, adding extra richness and subtle, nutty crunch. In Black households during the 1970s, these sausage rolls appeared at every major holiday, their ease of preparation making them perfect for busy cooks managing multiple dishes. Children loved them because they were small, portable, and perfectly sized for little hands. Sweet potato pie was the crown of the Christmas table, the dessert children begged for long before dinner was even served. Mothers boiled the sweet potatoes until they softened, then mashed them with butter, evaporated milk, sugar, eggs, and warm spices that filled the house with the smell of holidays. The filling turned silky and golden as they poured it into handmade crusts, rolled thin and pressed into the pie dish with practiced fingers. While the pies baked, the entire kitchen transformed, the air turning thick with cinnamon and nutmeg, making children circle the oven like hungry little satellites. When the pies finally emerged, the tops had a gentle sheen, and the centers jiggled just enough to promise the perfect texture. Children always begged for a slice before dinner, and mothers always said no with a smile because part of the joy was waiting. The flavor was warm, creamy, familiar, and impossibly comforting. The kind of sweetness that felt like it came from the soul, not just the kitchen. Sweet potato pie tasted like tradition, pride, and the pure excitement of Christmas in a single bite. Pinto beans with salt pork were one of the most dependable weekday dinners because dried beans cost almost nothing and could fill a pot big enough to feed everyone for days. Mothers poured the beans into a bowl the night before and let them soak, softening them just enough so they would cook evenly. In the morning, the beans were rinsed, the pot was filled, and a small piece of salt pork was tucked in for flavor. It was rarely more than a square of fat with a bit of meat clinging to it, but that little piece carried the whole dish. As the beans simmered, the house filled with a savory, comforting smell that made children stop whatever they were doing and stand near the stove. Mothers stirred the pot slowly, checking the beans until they softened into that creamy, perfect texture. Paired with cornbread or rice, it became a complete dinner. Some families ate this for 2 or 3 nights in a row, each bowl tasting better after sitting overnight. Mothers knew how to adjust the pot with simple seasonings, making the most humble meal feel warm and steady. Pinto beans with salt pork were simple, humble, and deeply loved, the food that made families feel full even when money was scarce. Maypop fruit mash turned the wild passion fruit of the American South into a rare dessert filled with tropical fragrance. Known as maypop for the sound of its hollow fruit when stepped on, this native vine produced aromatic yellow fruits that ripened in late summer. Enslaved foragers gathered the fruit, split the rinds, and scooped the bright pulp into a bowl with a drizzle of molasses or honey when such sweeteners were at hand. The result was a naturally tangy treat that needed no cooking and provided a burst of vitamins. The flavor, a cross between citrus and melon, delighted anyone lucky enough to taste it. Even after emancipation, rural families prized maypops for jellies and pies, and the plant remains a cherished wild edible across the Southeast. Maypop fruit mash preserves a memory of fleeting seasonal abundance and the creativity that transformed wild gifts into moments of celebration, proving that even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to enjoy the bright, unique flavors offered freely by the natural world. Mustard greens with smoked turkey necks carried the flavor of endurance from one generation to the next. During the Great Depression and later years when ham hocks became expensive or scarce, cooks turned to the neck bones of smoked turkey for the same rich depth. The greens simmered slowly in seasoned broth until tender, soaking up the smoky essence of the meat and the spice of crushed red pepper. Families gathered around the pot to breathe in the savory aroma while cornbread baked in the oven. This dish offered nourishment and warmth, proof that ingenuity could turn modest ingredients into a feast. Children learned to wash and tear the greens while elders seasoned by taste alone, passing down a craft more than a recipe. Today, pre-washed greens and quick cooking methods have dulled the ritual, but the memory of long simmering pots and the steady comfort of smoked turkey necks remains a powerful reminder of resilience and shared meals. Smoked oysters on crackers with hot sauce were adventurous bites that curious children tried, the smoky, briny oysters creating complex flavors that divided people into lovers and haters with no middle ground. Fathers would open tins of smoked oysters packed in oil, arranging them on serving platters surrounded by crackers and providing small bottles of hot sauce for those who wanted extra heat. The oysters had a strong, distinctive flavor, smoky from the curing process and intensely oceanic. Each oyster was placed on a cracker, sometimes with a tiny drop of hot sauce, creating bite-sized portions that delivered maximum flavor. In 1970s, Black household smoked oysters represented coastal sophistication and culinary bravery, appetizers that showed guests the host was willing to serve bold, distinctive foods. Children who tried smoked oysters either loved them immediately or swore them off forever, the strong flavor creating lasting memories. Hot water cornbread fried in cast iron was the Christmas side that disappeared faster than anything else on the table. Mothers mixed cornmeal, hot water salt, and a touch of oil until the dough came together, then shaped it gently by hand with the kind of practiced ease that only came from years of doing it. The patties hissed the moment they hit the hot skillet, frying into golden rounds with crisp edges and soft centers that made mouths water instantly. Children hovered as the cornbread browned, praying the first batch would be theirs and watching every flip like it was a holiday performance. These little cakes tasted buttery and warm, even without butter, perfect for dipping into greens gravy or anything else that needed a little extra comfort. Hot water cornbread tasted like tradition simplicity and holiday comfort made in minutes, carrying the kind of love that only came from hands that cooked for many. Cornbread and potlikker supper was the kind of meal that grew out of nothing but still felt like everything. Potlikker, the broth left behind after cooking greens, was never thrown away in a black kitchen. It was liquid gold, full of nutrients and flavored with whatever seasoning or scraps of pork simmered with the greens. Mothers poured it into bowls or skillets, added hot cornbread right from the pan, and let it soak until the bread softened around the edges. Children loved breaking the cornbread into pieces, mixing it into the warm potlikker until it became thick, almost like a stew. It tasted deeply savory and rich, far more filling than anyone expected from what was technically a leftover. Some nights this meal was eaten quietly, everyone savoring the warmth after long days. Other nights it became a shared moment, kids dipping their cornbread at the same time just to see who soaked up the most cornbread, and potlikker supper was survival wrapped in tradition. A reminder that nothing in the kitchen ever went to waste. Wild rice pudding combined indigenous grains with African-inspired preparation to create a dish both nourishing and subtly sweet. Wild rice grew naturally in shallow lakes and slow rivers, and enslaved families near these wetlands harvested the dark grains with paddles and baskets, drying them in the sun for year-round use. Cooked slowly in water until tender, The rice was stirred with a bit of sorghum syrup or honey if available, making a warm pudding that supplied protein and lasting energy. Its nutty flavor and satisfying texture turned a simple bowl into a special treat, especially when fresh fruit or spices could be added. This recipe carried forward after emancipation as African American cooks continued to value wild rice for festive meals and family gatherings. Modern chefs still celebrate its earthy richness, but the story behind wild rice pudding honors the blend of native and African foodways that sustained people through scarcity and created a dessert that is at once humble and deeply rooted in the shared history of America's wetlands and kitchens. Skillet. Fried catfish with cornmeal crust was the pride of riverbank communities and churchyard gatherings. Fishermen returned at dawn with fresh-caught catfish while cooks prepared heavy iron skillets filled with hot lard or peanut oil. Fillets were dredged in seasoned cornmeal until every piece was coated in a golden layer ready for the crackling pan. The sizzle of fish hitting the oil was music to children waiting for the first crisp bite. Friday fish fries became weekly celebrations where neighbors brought sides of slaw and hush puppies, and stories flowed as freely as sweet tea. The flavor of smoky river water lingered in each flaky bite, reminding everyone of the connection between food and place. Modern diners may order catfish in restaurants, but the ritual of catching, cleaning, and frying by the water's edge has faded, leaving only memories of warm evenings when the entire town smelled of cornmeal and spice and laughter carried across the banks. Pimento cheese pinwheels made with tortillas spread with creamy pimento cheese and rolled into tight spirals created colorful, easy-to-eat bites that children grabbed enthusiastically. Aunties would spread flour tortillas with homemade pimento cheese made from sharp cheddar, cream cheese, diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and seasonings. The tortillas were then rolled tightly into logs, wrapped in plastic wrap, and refrigerated for several hours to firm up and make slicing easier. Once chilled, the logs were unwrapped and sliced into rounds about half an inch thick, each pinwheel revealing the bright orange cheese dotted with red pimento pieces. In 1970s, Black households' pimento cheese pinwheels represented modern entertaining, a variation on traditional pimento cheese that made serving easier and more elegant. Children loved pimento cheese pinwheels because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and tasted like their favorite spread in a fun new format. Yeast rolls brushed with butter were the soft, cloud-like bread children could never stop reaching for during Christmas dinner. Mothers kneaded the dough patiently, letting it rise under warm towels until it doubled in size, checking it gently with fingers that knew the exact feel of readiness. When the rolls baked, they puffed into golden pillows that glistened as melted butter brushed across their tops, filling the air with warmth. They were perfect for sopping up gravy pairing with ham or eating warm and plain straight from the pan while steam curled upward. Children always tried to sneak one before dinner even began, unable to resist. Yeast rolls tasted like softness, warmth, and the kind of love that came from hands that cooked all day to make Christmas feel whole. Cabbage and sausage pot dinners were beloved because cabbage was cheap, filling, and strong enough to stand up to long cooking. Mothers sliced the cabbage thinly, added onions, potatoes, and just a few coins worth of cured sausage. As it cooked, the sausage flavored the whole pot, giving every bite that smoky richness even though the meat itself was scarce. Sometimes mothers added pepper flakes or vinegar to brighten the pot, and the whole mixture softened into something soothing and hearty. Children felt like they were eating something rich and comforting, even though most of the volume came from vegetables. The pot simmered slowly, filling the kitchen with steam and warmth during cold evenings. Kids felt lucky whenever this meal appeared because it tasted like more than the ingredients suggested. Cabbage and sausage pot dinners were winter survival disguised as comfort food. Cypress berry relish brought a sharp tang to otherwise plain meals by using the small, resin-scented berries of native cypress trees. Gatherers collected the ripe berries carefully, then simmered them with a little water and a drizzle of molasses when available, creating a dark, aromatic relish with a unique balance of sweet and bitter flavors. This condiment enlivened cornbread, stewed greens, or smoked fish, adding variety to a diet that often lacked spices. The recipe reflected African traditions of turning wild fruits into bold sauces and also borrowed techniques from indigenous peoples who valued cypress for its medicinal properties. Though seldom made today, the memory of cypress berry relish lingers in regional stories of swamp foraging and resourceful cooking. It highlights how a deep understanding of the local ecosystem allowed people to transform unexpected ingredients into something flavorful and sustaining. Cypress berry relish stands as a tribute to both culinary creativity and the enduring connection between survival foods and the natural abundance of the southern wetlands. Tell us which survival food amazed you most, like this video, and subscribe to keep these powerful food traditions alive. Molasses stacked cake graced weddings and homecomings with a sweetness born of patience and skill. Thin layers of spiced cake were baked individually, then stacked high with a rich molasses filling that soaked into the crumb as the dessert rested overnight. The dark syrup lent a deep flavor that spoke of both Caribbean cane fields and southern kitchens. Families often baked the layers days ahead, turning the assembly into a festive gathering where aunts and cousins worked side by side. Each slice told a story of celebration and endurance, for molasses was affordable and plentiful even when other sweeteners were scarce. The cake's tall, impressive stature made it a centerpiece on tables decorated for special occasions, a symbol of abundance even in lean times. Today, few households take the time to roll, bake, and stack so many delicate layers, and the recipe lives mostly in old family cookbooks. Those who have tasted it know the quiet triumph of a dessert that rewards effort with lasting memory. Bacon-wrapped water chestnuts delivered crispy, salty, and slightly sweet bites that children fought over despite not knowing exactly what water chestnuts were, the bacon exterior and crunchy interior creating mysterious but delicious combinations. Aunties would drain cans of whole water chestnuts, wrapping each one with half a strip of bacon and securing it with toothpicks before arranging them on baking sheets. Before baking, each bundle was brushed with a mixture of brown sugar and soy sauce that caramelized during cooking, creating a sweet salty glaze that coated the bacon. The water chestnuts roasted until the bacon was crispy and rendered, the fat dripping away while the sugar coating turned golden brown and slightly sticky. In Black households during the 1970s, bacon-wrapped water chestnuts represented sophistication borrowed from magazines, recipes that seemed fancy but remained simple for home cooks. Children loved them because bacon made everything better. Hoppin' John Holiday Bowl was the hearty dish that brought luck, warmth, and full bellies to the Christmas table. Mothers simmered black-eyed peas slowly with onions, garlic, spices, and a bit of pork or smoked meat to deepen the flavor, letting the pot bubble quietly as the house filled with a smell everyone recognized. When the peas turned tender, they were ladled over soft white rice, creating a bowl that was simple but deeply satisfying, the kind of meal that wrapped itself around you. Children loved mixing the rice and peas together, letting every bite taste smoky, earthy, and comforting as the broth soaked into the grains. Mothers made it because it fed many people for very little and carried a tradition rooted in hope for the coming year, a reminder that blessings often began in the kitchen. A bowl of Hoppin' John tasted like heritage blessing and a warm moment shared with the whole family, the type of dish that felt like both nourishment and promise. Mustard greens with cornmeal dumplings were a full dinner in households where meat was too expensive to rely on. Greens were cheap, earthy, and sturdy enough to last through long cooking, but mothers knew they needed something extra to make them filling, so they mixed cornmeal with hot water, salt, and sometimes a little fat, shaping the mixture into soft dumplings that simmered right in the pot. As the greens cooked down, the dumplings absorbed the broth, swelling and thickening into something that stuck to the ribs. The house filled with a deep, savory aroma that signaled a warm supper was coming. Kids might not have realized how frugal the dish was, but they knew it tasted good and kept them full for hours. The greens were tender, the dumplings soft but hearty, and every bite felt grounding. Mustard greens with cornmeal dumplings were survival disguised as comfort, proof that simple foods could carry a family through a hard decade. Red drink, Juneteenth punch flowed like a symbol of freedom and memory at community celebrations marking emancipation. Made from hibiscus petals or bright strawberries steeped into a deep crimson infusion, the drink stood for resilience and the blood of those who fought for liberation. Families would gather in churchyards and town squares, pouring the sweet, tangy liquid into simple cups while music and laughter filled the warm June air. Children chased each other between picnic tables as elders told the story of the first Juneteenth, reminding everyone of the hard-won joy behind the holiday. The punch often carried a gentle spice from cloves or ginger, offering a flavor both refreshing and layered, much like the history it honored. Preparing the drink was as important as drinking it, with women and men alike contributing fruit, sugar, and labor to the cause. Though some communities still keep the tradition alive, many younger generations have never tasted the vibrant red drink that once defined a day of remembrance and celebration. Goosefoot seed meal offered vital nourishment when cultivated grains were scarce or too costly. Goosefoot, also known as lamb's quarters, grew abundantly along field edges and yielded tiny seeds rich in protein and minerals. Enslaved harvesters shook the plants over cloths to collect the seeds, then winnowed and ground them into a fine flour. This flour could be cooked into hot cereal, mixed with cornmeal for bread, or used to thicken stews, providing a surprisingly hearty alternative to purchased grain. The practice drew on both African and indigenous traditions of using wild seeds as staple foods. Even after emancipation, rural families in parts of the Midwest and Appalachia continued to gather goosefoot seeds for their high nutritional value. Modern interest in quinoa, which is a close relative, echoes this old wisdom. Goosefoot seed meal stands as a reminder that careful attention to the landscape and patient handwork could turn what many considered weeds into a dependable source of strength and nourishment that kept families fed through the hardest seasons. Chicken salad stuffed in cherry tomatoes created colorful, bite-sized portions that children eagerly grabbed. The cool, creamy chicken salad contrasting with the fresh, slightly tart tomato cups that held everything together. Aunties would hollow out cherry tomatoes using small spoons or melon ballers, creating little edible bowls that were functional and beautiful when arranged on serving platters. The chicken salad was made from finely chopped cooked chicken mixed with mayonnaise, diced celery, sweet pickle relish, and seasonings. The mixture kept cold until serving time. Each hollowed tomato was filled with a generous spoonful of chicken salad, mounded slightly on top for visual appeal. In 1970s Black households, these stuffed tomatoes represented creativity and presentation, transforming simple ingredients into appetizers that looked impressive enough for special occasions. Children loved them because they were perfectly portioned, colorful, and combined familiar flavors in a fun format. Turkey neck gravy over rice was the thrifty holiday dish that tasted richer than anything store-bought, proving that skill mattered more than ingredients. Mothers simmered turkey necks with onions, celery, and spices until the broth turned deep and flavorful, stirring occasionally while the aroma drifted through the house. Once the meat softened, they thickened the broth into gravy and poured it generously over rice, creating a meal that felt comforting and complete even on a tight budget. Children scraped their plates clean, knowing this was one of those dishes that only appeared on special days. The gravy seeped into every grain of rice, turning something simple into something layered and rich. Turkey neck gravy tasted like resourcefulness, richness, and holiday care made from simple ingredients handled with love. Fried fatback with wilted greens was a dinner that stretched almost nothing into something satisfying. Fatback was cheap, salty, and often the only pork a household could afford, but its flavor went a long way. Mothers sliced it into thin pieces and fried them in a hot skillet until the edges curled and turned golden. The rendered fat was then used to cook mustard or collard greens, softening them into a tender, silky pile that tasted deeply seasoned even without meat. Sometimes mothers added a splash of vinegar or a pinch of sugar to balance the sharpness of the greens, turning the pot into something even more comforting. The sizzle of the fatback and the sharp smell of the greens mixed together in a way that pulled children toward the kitchen. They waited near the stove, hoping for a crispy piece fresh from the pan, knowing it might be the only meat they tasted that night. A single piece of fat back on the plate felt like a treat, even though it cost almost nothing. The greens wilted perfectly in the hot pan, absorbing every bit of flavor left behind. Mothers served big portions because greens filled the belly and kept everyone satisfied. It was a simple meal, but it fed the whole family. Fried fatback with wilted greens was resourcefulness turned into tradition. Vegetable plate night was a tradition born from necessity, but remembered for how comforting it felt. Meat was expensive, so mothers filled the table with multiple vegetable dishes instead. Sweet potatoes, okra, beans, greens, cabbage, or whatever could be grown, bought cheaply or shared by neighbors. Each dish was simple on its own, but together they formed a full, colorful plate. Kids enjoyed picking from different bowls, building their own combinations like it was a special occasion. The textures ranged from creamy to crispy, the flavors layered with seasoning that masked how inexpensive the ingredients were. With cornbread on the side, the meal was filling, warm, and satisfying. Mothers often made this dinner at the end of the week, using whatever was left in the kitchen, turning scraps into something everyone looked forward to. Neighbors sometimes exchanged small bowls, making the meal feel even more communal. Kids loved the freedom of choosing their favorites, stacking their plates high without a single complaint. Vegetable plate night showed that a dinner did not need meat to feel abundant. It was community, creativity, and care served up in small bowls across the table. Fried green tomato. Po' boys turned unripe tomatoes into a sandwich that tasted like pure coastal sunshine wrapped in crunchy cornmeal. Thick slices of firm green tomatoes were dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried until their edges crisped and their centers softened just enough to release a bright tang. Piled high on soft French bread with a smear of remoulade and a handful of shredded lettuce, they became a favorite along Gulf Coast streets where shrimp boats docked and music floated from open windows. Vendors often sold them at fish fries and fairs when seafood prices climbed too high, proving that a garden vegetable could carry the day as well as any oyster or crab. Families remembered the scent of hot oil and the pop of cornmeal batter while waiting in line for a sandwich that blended thrift and celebration. Today, fast food counters try to imitate the flavor, but they cannot capture the quiet magic of fresh garden tomatoes picked before ripening, fried in backyard kitchens, and shared among neighbors who knew the value of every bite. Stuffed celery with cream cheese and pimento created colorful boats that children picked up by their crunchy handles, the creamy filling contrasting perfectly with the crisp, fresh vegetable that provided texture amidst holiday indulgence. Mothers would wash and trim celery stalks, cutting them into 3-inch lengths before drying them thoroughly and arranging them on serving platters like little canoes. The filling was made by beating cream cheese until fluffy, then folding in diced pimentos, mayonnaise, and seasonings like garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper. The cream cheese mixture was spread generously into each celery groove, mounded slightly and sometimes garnished with paprika, chopped olives, or crispy bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, stuffed celery represented an attempt to include something fresh among heavier holiday offerings. Children loved them because the cream cheese provided richness while celery added refreshing crunch. Pineapple glazed ham slices were a festive touch. Black families used to make Christmas feel luxurious even when the budget was slim. A single ham slice could feed several children when dressed with pineapple rounds cooked in brown sugar and pan drippings, stretching what little meat the family had. The fruit caramelized on top, turning golden and glossy as its juices melted into the salty ham below. Children loved the mix of sweet and salty, the syrup dripping down the edges of the ham like liquid gold, making every plate look special. Some mothers even saved the pineapple juice from the can to make sure nothing went to waste. Pineapple glaze turned a simple slice of meat into something that looked like it belonged on a holiday magazine cover, even though it came from thrift and creativity. It tasted like celebration made from care, resourcefulness, and the determination to make Christmas feel full no matter what the pantry looked like. Red gravy rice bowls were the kind of quick, filling meal mothers made on nights when time and money were both running thin. Red gravy was not the fancy kind found in restaurants, but a simple tomato-based sauce cooked with onions, seasoning, and whatever bits of leftover fat or meat were available. It simmered until the onions softened and the flavors blended into something far more satisfying than its ingredients suggested. Some mothers added a pinch of sugar to balance the acidity, while others stirred in a spoonful of flour to thicken it just enough to cling to the rice. The pot bubbled gently on the stove, sending out a warm smell that wrapped the house in comfort long before dinner was served. Mothers spooned it generously over fresh rice, letting the sauce seep into every grain. Children dug in eagerly, blowing on each bite because they never waited long enough for it to cool. They loved how the rice soaked up the sauce, turning a handful of cheap staples into something that tasted whole. It was cheap, warm, and grounding in a way only comfort food can be. Red gravy rice bowls tasted like resilience, the kind families depended on. Roasted sassafras roots provided a fragrant tea with a naturally sweet, slightly spicy flavor that refreshed the spirit and offered mild stimulation. Enslaved gatherers carefully dug the young roots of the sassafras tree, washed them, and roasted them over gentle heat to draw out their aromatic oils. When steeped in hot water, the roasted roots released a deep reddish brew with notes of vanilla and citrus. This tea was enjoyed both for its taste and for traditional medicinal uses, reflecting a blend of African and indigenous knowledge about native plants. After emancipation, sassafras tea became a beloved Southern beverage, eventually serving as the base flavor for the first root beers. The practice demonstrates how a simple foraged root shaped a lasting American flavor that extends far beyond its humble beginnings. Roasted sassafras roots show how understanding the forest's offerings allowed communities to create drinks of comfort and cultural significance from ingredients freely given by the land itself. Okra fritters, also known as okra cakes, offered crisp golden edges and a tender interior that celebrated the summer garden. Fresh okra pods were chopped fine, mixed with cornmeal, onions, and a dash of pepper, then spooned into hot oil until each patty puffed and browned. Sold at fish fries, church picnics, and traveling fairs, these fritters were easy to eat by hand and full of flavor that tied African heritage to Southern soil. The okra gave a subtle sweetness and a soft binding that kept the patties moist, while the cornmeal crust provided satisfying crunch. Children waited impatiently beside bubbling skillets, hoping for the first fritter to cool enough to taste. Vendors wrapped them in newspaper cones so families could stroll through evening air scented with music and spice. Modern snack foods have replaced these handcrafted treats, but those who remember the sound of oil popping and the taste of garden-fresh okra know the fritters carried more than flavor. They held the joy of gathering and the pride of turning humble crops into a festival of taste. Chicken liver pâté spread on crackers created rich, smooth bites that adventurous children tried, the creamy texture and distinctive flavor introducing them to foods that felt grown-up and sophisticated. Aunties would sauté chicken livers with onions and butter until cooked through but still slightly pink inside, then blend them with cream cheese, spices, and sometimes brandy or sherry until smooth. The pâté was chilled in molds or ramekins, then unmolded onto serving platters surrounded by crackers and garnished with chopped parsley or capers. The texture was silky smooth, while the flavor was rich and slightly metallic in that characteristic liver way that some loved and others found challenging. In Black households during the 1970s, chicken liver pâté represented culinary sophistication, recipes borrowed from French cuisine and adapted to Southern ingredients. Children who tried it felt brave and grown up, stepping outside their comfort zones to taste foods their parents enjoyed at special gatherings. Butter rolls baked in sweet syrup were the hidden treasure of Southern Christmas tables, a dish that blurred the line between dessert and bread. Mothers rolled the dough into soft spirals, placed them in a pan, and poured a warm mix of milk butter and sugar over the top, letting it settle into every gap. As they baked, the syrup thickened into something creamy sweet and almost custard-like, coating every corner. Children hovered near the oven, unable to wait, their eyes following the bubbling edges. When the rolls came out piping hot, they tore apart in soft, tender layers that melted on the tongue. Butter rolls tasted like sweetness, softness, and pure Christmas comfort, The kind of treat made with hands that understood how to turn simple ingredients into unforgettable joy. Tomato okra rice stew, sometimes called country stew, was a dish built from the garden and the pantry, relying on vegetables and rice instead of meat. Mothers combined canned tomatoes, fresh or frozen okra, onions, and seasonings in a large pot, letting everything soften into a thick, spoonable stew. A little garlic or hot pepper was added when available, giving the pot a gentle heat that made it even more satisfying. Rice was added to stretch the meal, swelling as it absorbed the tomato broth. The mixture simmered for a long time, sending up warm, familiar scents that wrapped the house in comfort. Children gathered near the stove, lifting the lid even when told not to, eager to see the bubbling stew. Kids loved its bright flavor and soft texture, especially when paired with cornbread. They learned early that vegetables could stand on their own when seasoned with care. It was a filling dinner made from the most basic ingredients, yet it never felt lacking. Tomato okra rice stew was proof that even plant-based meals could feel rich. Homemade chow chow relish added brightness and crunch to plates crowded with greens, beans, and smoked meats. Cabbage, onions, peppers, and green tomatoes were chopped fine and simmered with vinegar, mustard seed, and sugar until they formed a tangy condiment that could last through winter. Every household had a slightly different recipe, some sweeter, some hotter, each a reflection of the cook's own hand. The relish brought sharp contrast to rich dishes like pork shoulder or pinto beans, cutting through heaviness with a lively bite. In late summer, neighbors gathered to chop vegetables together, sharing stories as big pots bubbled on outdoor fires. Jars lined pantry shelves in rows of glowing gold and green, a promise of flavor when fresh produce was long gone. Over time, store-bought pickles and bottled sauces replaced the careful preparation of chow chow, but its memory endures wherever families recall the sound of knives on wooden boards and the reward of a bright spoonful alongside a hearty meal. Cheese straws made from sharp cheddar and cayenne pepper were crispy, addictive sticks that disappeared from serving bowls almost as quickly as they were refilled, their orange gold color and spicy kick making them irresistible. Grandmothers would grate blocks of sharp cheddar by hand, mixing it with softened butter, flour, cayenne pepper, and salt until the dough came together, then pressing it through cookie presses or rolling it into long ropes before slicing. The cheese straws baked until crispy and slightly browned at the edges, filling kitchens with the sharp, tangy aroma of melting cheese mixed with subtle heat. Once cooled, they were stored in tins, maintaining crispness for days. In 1970s, Black households, cheese straws represented Southern tradition, recipes passed down through generations with each family adding their signature touch, extra cayenne, paprika, or pecans. Baked macaroni and cheese with evaporated milk was the rich, creamy holiday version that families saved for Christmas because it took more ingredients, more time, and more love than the everyday stovetop version. Mothers boiled the macaroni until it was tender, then mixed it with shredded cheese, butter, eggs, and evaporated milk that gave the dish its signature richness. When it baked in the oven, the top browned just enough to form a crispy layer children fought over, while the inside stayed soft, cheesy, and comforting. The smell alone made the table feel festive, a deep, savory aroma that told everyone Christmas dinner was almost ready. Children scooped big spoonfuls onto their plates, watching the cheese stretch in long, soft strands that made the dish feel luxurious even when budgets were tight. This was a dish built from care, the kind of food mothers made because they knew the holiday needed something special, even if they had to stretch ingredients to make it happen. Every family had their own version, but every version made children close their eyes and smile at the first bite. Macaroni and cheese with evaporated milk tasted like celebration, tradition, and a holiday table made complete. Molasses-glazed ham hock plates were built around a single inexpensive hock that flavored an entire pot. Ham hocks were meaty enough to give greens, beans, or vegetables a deep, smoky richness, but cheap enough for families on tight budgets. Mothers simmered the hock slowly, letting its flavor seep into everything in the pot. Sometimes onions, carrots, or potatoes were added, turning the dish into a complete meal. A drizzle of molasses added sweetness that cut through the salt, creating a glaze that coated the meat and vegetables. Children waited eagerly for their serving, sometimes hoping to get the piece of meat, but always satisfied with the vegetables soaked in its flavor. The dish filled the home with a holiday-like aroma even on ordinary days. It was the kind of meal that felt festive even when money was low. Molasses-glazed ham hock plates were holiday flavor made every day affordable. Sweet potato pie with brown sugar meringue crowned holiday tables with a beauty that matched its flavor. Smooth, mashed sweet potatoes blended with warm spices created a filling as rich as any custard, poured into a flaky handmade crust. The crowning touch was a cloud of meringue whipped with brown sugar until caramel-scented peaks formed and browned lightly in the oven. Families saved the first slice for honored guests or elders, a sign of respect and affection. The pie carried the sweetness of the southern soil and the skill of generations who knew how to stretch simple ingredients into celebration. Children licked the mixing bowls clean while parents watched the meringue rise, a shared moment of anticipation before the feast. Over time, commercial pies and instant mixes dulled the tradition, but those who remember the warm aroma of brown sugar meringue know that this dessert is more than food. It is a memory of family love, patient hands, and the quiet pride of homemade beauty. Deviled eggs with paprika and pickle relish were the appetizer children fought over at every Thanksgiving gathering, their bright yellow centers dotted with red paprika creating tiny works of art. Grandmothers would boil dozens of eggs the night before, peeling them while warm and slicing lengthwise before scooping yolks into mixing bowls. The yolks were mashed with mayonnaise, yellow mustard, sweet pickle relish, and vinegar until perfectly creamy, then spooned back into egg white halves. Paprika sprinkled on top added color and smokiness. In Black households during the 1970s, deviled eggs symbolized celebration, appearing at every gathering from church dinners to reunions. Children would hover near the kitchen, waiting to sneak one before dinner, knowing that once adults arrived, these treats would disappear. The combination of creamy richness, tangy pickle brightness, and paprika's heat satisfied everyone. Brown butter green beans were the kind of Christmas side dish that brought elegance to the table without costing more than a handful of coins. Black mothers in the 1960s knew how to elevate simple vegetables with nothing but time, seasoning, and a patient hand at the skillet. They simmered the beans until they softened, then added butter to the pan, letting it melt and deepen into a nutty brown that scented the entire kitchen. That butter clung to every bean, turning something plain into something rich and irresistible. Children might not have known why these beans tasted different, but they knew they loved them. The dish balanced softness and flavor, proving that holiday meals were not about money, but about intention and skill. Brown butter green beans often sat beside ham, chicken, dressing, or whatever the family could afford that year, acting as a steady, comforting anchor to the plate. Mothers appreciated how far the dish could stretch, filling bowls without straining the pantry. Families gathered around the table, taking generous spoonfuls because the flavor tasted deeper than a simple vegetable had any right to taste. Even long after childhood ended, people remembered the nuttiness, the shine, and the warmth that rose from the pan on Christmas afternoon. Brown butter green beans tasted like thrift turned into luxury, one careful stir at a time. Creamed corn and biscuit supper was a simple, pantry-based dinner that mothers relied on when grocery money was at its lowest. Canned corn was mixed with milk, flour, butter, and seasoning until it thickened into a creamy, sweet, comforting base. Meanwhile, biscuits baked in the oven, their edges browning just enough to promise a warm, tender center. The combination was filling, familiar, and deeply soothing. Kids broke their biscuits open and scooped big spoonfuls of the creamed corn inside, making little sandwiches that dripped with warmth. Every bite tasted like home, even though the meal came from the most basic ingredients. Mothers often prepared this meal when there was no meat left at all, turning simple staples into something that felt complete. The smell of biscuits baking made the whole house feel calmer, softer, and safer. Even adults looked forward to this humble pairing because it brought back memories of earlier years. Creamed corn and biscuit suppers were proof that thrift did not mean giving up comfort. Buttermilk cornbread baked in cast iron anchored countless suppers with its golden crust and tangy bite. The heavy skillet, seasoned from years of use, gave the bread a flavor impossible to match in a modern pan. Families stirred cornmeal with fresh buttermilk, a little lard, and a pinch of salt, then listened for the satisfying hiss as the batter hit hot iron. The result was a loaf both crisp at the edges and tender inside, perfect for soaking up potlikker from simmered greens or for eating plain with a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandmothers often taught their grandchildren to test the heat of the skillet by flicking in a few drops of water, a small ritual that connected generations. On Sundays after church, the scent of baking cornbread drifted through neighborhoods, promising a meal that united family and friends. Today, prepackaged mixes and quick breads have replaced the slow, careful method that once defined African American kitchens, and the art of true cast-iron cornbread grows rarer with each passing year. Salmon croquettes served as mini appetizers were crispy golden patties that children devoured while standing in kitchens, their hands reaching for more before finishing what they were already eating. Grandmothers would drain cans of pink salmon, carefully picking through the meat to remove bones and skin, then flaking the fish into mixing bowls where it was combined with chopped onions, bell peppers, beaten eggs, cornmeal, and seasonings. The mixture was shaped into small patties, pressed firmly to ensure they held together, then carefully lowered into hot oil where they sizzled and turned golden brown. The exterior developed a crispy crust while the interior stayed moist and flavorful. In 1970s, Black households' salmon croquettes were economical elegance, transforming canned fish into something special worthy of holiday tables. Children loved them because they were handheld, didn't require forks, and packed protein and flavor into every crispy bite. Cornbread dressing with giblets was the heart of the Christmas table, a dish that required time, patience, and the kind of cooking skill mothers carried without ever needing a recipe book. The cornbread was baked the day before, then crumbled by hand until it formed the perfect base. Giblets were boiled and chopped finely, added for richness and tradition. Mothers mixed everything with onions, celery, broth, and spices until the dressing reached a consistency somewhere between soft and firm. When it baked, the top browned beautifully while the inside stayed moist and savory. Children always asked for extra scoops because no holiday plate felt complete without it. Cornbread dressing tasted like history, effort, and the deep comfort of a dish made entirely from scratch. Neckbone stew with potatoes was the kind of dinner that proved Black mothers in the 1960s could turn almost nothing into something that fed both the body and the spirit. Neckbones were one of the cheapest cuts in the store, thrown into the bargain bin because no one with extra money wanted them. But mothers knew better. They scrubbed the bones clean, set them in a deep pot, and covered them with water until the kitchen filled with the slow rising scent of broth. Potatoes were added later, cut into big chunks so they could soak up every bit of the flavor. The stew simmered for hours, bubbling gently while children drifted in and out of the kitchen, hungry long before dinner was ready. By the time the pot was done, the neck bones were tender, the potatoes were soft, and the broth was rich in a way only time could create. Mothers ladled it into bowls with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had stretched scraps into a full meal for an entire family. It tasted like warmth, patience, and the kind of love that works behind the scenes. Neckbone stew with potatoes was survival food made beautiful through care. Sweet potato biscuits once brought warmth to breakfast tables and Sunday dinners alike. Mashed sweet potatoes blended with flour, butter, and a touch of sugar created a dough that baked into soft, slightly sweet rounds. These biscuits paired beautifully with salty country ham or a drizzle of sorghum syrup, offering a perfect balance of savory and sweet. Families often baked them in batches large enough to feed relatives and neighbors, turning an ordinary morning into a quiet feast. The natural sweetness of the potatoes gave the biscuits a gentle orange hue, a visual comfort as well as a culinary one. Children were often given the task of mashing the cooked potatoes, a small role that made them proud participants in a beloved family recipe. Today, store-bought rolls and instant mixes have replaced the slow, careful preparation of true sweet potato biscuits. For those who remember their fragrance filling the kitchen, each bite carries memories of kinship, generosity, and a heritage that deserves to be cherished. Fried chicken wings with hot sauce and butter created sticky, finger-licking appetizers that had children lined up before dinner was announced, their crispy exteriors giving way to tender meat falling off the bone. Families prepared massive batches on Thanksgiving morning, seasoning them with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, before dredging in flour and dropping into cast-iron skillets filled with bubbling hot oil. The wings fried until golden brown and crackling crisp, filling kitchens with aromas that drew everyone from every corner. Once drained and still hot, wings were tossed in melted butter and hot sauce, the heat always bold and spicy. In the 1970s, Black households, these wings represented abundance, showing guests everyone was welcome to eat their fill. Children loved them because they were handheld, required no utensils, and delivered maximum flavor with every bite. Chicken and dumplings holiday pot was the dish that wrapped Christmas in warmth, especially in homes where money was tight and hearts were full. Mothers simmered chicken pieces, sometimes wings, backs, or necks, in a large pot with onions and celery until the broth grew rich and fragrant. Then came the dumplings, soft dough dropped by spoonful into the bubbling pot. They puffed as they cooked, soaking up all the flavor until each dumpling tasted buttery, tender, and soothing. Children loved lifting the lid to watch the dumplings dance in the steam, begging for the first bowl even when they knew it needed more time. When served, the dish felt like a warm blanket in food form, thick, hearty, and perfect for winter nights. Mothers made chicken and dumplings because it stretched modest ingredients into enough to feed a crowd, leaving no one hungry. Each spoonful tasted like comfort built through slow cooking and patient hands. Even years later, adults remembered the steam fogging the windows, the sound of the bubbling pot, and the quiet moment when the first dumpling broke open on their tongue. Chicken and dumplings tasted like holiday love large enough to fill a room. Kidney bean chili stretchers were a budget version of chili that relied heavily on beans and only a small handful of beef. Mothers browned just enough meat to add flavor, then added onions, canned tomatoes, and kidney beans, letting everything simmer into a thick stew. The beans softened and absorbed the seasoning, creating a dish that tasted rich despite its simplicity. Chili powder or pepper gave the pot warmth, turning the meal into comfort food that stretched across several days. Served over rice or with cornbread, it filled stomachs quickly. Kids loved how hearty it felt, never noticing how little meat was actually in the pot. The pot often stayed on the stove for multiple meals, each reheating, deepening the flavor. Mothers loved that it fed everyone without stress, making a single can of beans go much further than expected. It was the kind of meal that stretched time as much as ingredients. Kidney bean chili stretchers were survival disguised as celebration. Okra gumbo with fresh crab told the story of low-country waters and West African roots in every bowl. Thickened by the natural mucilage of okra and deepened with a slow-simmered stock, the stew held blue crab, onions, bell peppers, and fragrant spices that reflected both coastal bounty and ancestral memory. Fishermen brought the catch of the day to markets where cooks bargained for the sweetest crab meat, while home gardeners plucked tender okra pods from vines that thrived in humid summers. The gumbo pot became a gathering place where family and neighbors stood around sharing stories as the aroma of seafood and spice filled the air. Served over rice, each spoonful carried the taste of tides, soil, and a heritage that stretched back across the Atlantic. In modern times, many turn to faster recipes and frozen ingredients, losing the patient layering of flavor that once defined this dish. Yet for those who remember, nothing matches the soulful depth of a true okra gumbo made with freshly caught crab. Fried okra rounds served with ranch dressing were crispy, crunchy appetizers that introduced children to vegetables in ways that made them forget they were eating something healthy, the golden coating making every bite feel like a treat. Mothers would slice fresh okra into thick rounds, coating them first in buttermilk that helped breading adhere, then dredging them in seasoned cornmeal mixed with flour, salt, pepper, and garlic powder. The okra rounds were dropped into hot oil where they bubbled and crisped, the cornmeal coating turning golden brown while the okra inside stayed tender. Once drained on paper towels and sprinkled with extra salt while still hot, the okra was piled into serving bowls and placed near small dishes of ranch dressing that children dunked them into with enthusiasm. In Black households during the 1970s, fried okra represented Southern tradition meeting holiday hospitality. Children loved fried okra because it felt like eating fried chicken in vegetable form. Oven-baked barbecue turkey wings were the holiday main dish mothers perfected when whole turkeys were too expensive, but flavor was non-negotiable. The wings were seasoned with spices, rubbed down with sauce, and baked low and slow until the skin turned sticky, glossy, and rich with smoky sweetness. As they cooked, the house filled with a smell so good children wandered into the kitchen pretending they needed water just to get a peek. When the wings finally came out, the meat slid easily from the bone, tender and full of holiday warmth. Mothers made them because they stretched far, fed everyone, and tasted like a celebration even on a tight budget. Barbecue turkey wings tasted like creativity, comfort, and Christmas made possible through skill and love. Smothered chicken wings were a budget dinner that turned the cheapest poultry cut into something tender enough to fall off the bone. Wings were considered scraps in the 1960s, far from the party food they would become years later. Mothers browned them in a skillet, sprinkled flour to build a roux, and poured in water or broth until it thickened into a gravy that could stretch across a full pot of rice. The wings cooked low and slow, soaking up the gravy until they were soft, flavorful, and irresistible. The whole dish tasted like comfort, the kind that made you sit a little longer at the table just to savor the warmth. Children loved smothered wings because they felt rich even when they were not. Mothers loved them because they fed everyone without emptying their pockets. The gravy was always the real star, thick, savory, and perfect for spooning over everything on the plate. Leftovers rarely survived until the next day because kids asked for more before the pot even cooled. Smothered chicken wings were the kind of meal that made a house feel full even when the budget was not. Hoppin' John on New Year's Day was once a dish of deep meaning, carrying the promise of good fortune into every household that served it. Black-eyed peas simmered with rice, onions, and smoky cured meat made for a meal that was both filling and symbolic. Families across the South would gather on the first day of the year, confident that a bowl of this humble combination could bring luck, health, and steady work in the months ahead. The peas represented coins, the rice suggested abundance, and the pork gave a sense of strength and perseverance. Elders passed down stories of how this recipe came from West African traditions that traveled through the Middle Passage and took root in Carolina kitchens. Children learned to stir the pot while listening to tales of ancestors who found comfort in its aroma after days of uncertainty. Today, many people know the name, but few carry on the ritual with the same devotion that once marked every New Year's morning across countless African American homes. This dish represented the creativity and pride mothers brought to holiday meals, transforming canned and simple ingredients into something festive and memorable. Even decades later, people remembered the cool sweetness and the joy of unmolding it just right. Cranberry orange gelatin mold tasted like holiday sparkles shaped by steady hands. Molasses ginger cookies were the soft spiced treats Black families baked days before Christmas because they stayed tender and flavorful no matter how long they rested. Mothers mixed molasses, sugar, flour, ginger, and warm spices into a dough that filled the kitchen with a scent children never forgot. Rolled into balls and dusted with sugar, the cookies cracked as they baked, forming little ridges that hinted at the softness inside. Children reached for them the moment they cooled, savoring the chewy centers and deep molasses flavor. These cookies tasted warm and comforting, like winter spices wrapped in sweetness. Mothers loved them because they were inexpensive, made in large batches, and perfect for sharing with neighbors or packing into tins for relatives. Long after the holiday passed, families still found a few cookies tucked into jars, just as fresh as the day they were made. Molasses ginger cookies tasted like patience, spice, and the slow sweetness of Christmas tradition. Sausage balls made with breakfast sausage, cheese, and biscuit mix, baked into savory spheres that children popped into their mouths like candy, their crispy exteriors giving way to soft, cheesy, slightly spicy interiors. Mothers would combine raw breakfast sausage with shredded sharp cheddar cheese and dry biscuit mix, kneading everything together until well combined. The mixture was then rolled into balls about an inch in diameter, arranged on baking sheets with space between them, and baked until golden brown. As they baked, the fat from the sausage rendered while the cheese melted, creating savory, flavorful bites that were crispy outside and tender inside. In the 1970s, Black households, sausage balls represented easy entertaining, a recipe that could be made ahead. Children loved sausage balls because they were perfectly portioned, required no utensils, and delivered breakfast flavors in snackable form. Baked chicken and dressing casserole was the one-pan miracle that fed big families without stretching the budget too far, especially on holidays when everyone showed up hungry. Mothers layered shredded chicken with cornbread dressing broth, onions, celery, and spices, baking it until everything fused into a savory, comforting dish that smelled like home. The top browned just enough while the inside stayed moist, tender, and full of holiday flavor that felt like generations blending together. Children lined up with plates ready, knowing this was the kind of dish that disappeared fast because every scoop felt like a full meal. It was the ultimate sharing dish, one that made room for everyone at the table. Baked chicken and dressing tasted like togetherness tradition, and a Christmas table full of love that did not depend on extravagance. Stewed oxtails with rice gravy brought deep flavor and slow-cooked richness to Sunday tables across many African American communities. Oxtails, once inexpensive and overlooked, were browned in heavy pots and then simmered for hours with onions, garlic, and spices until the meat turned buttery soft. The braising liquid thickened into a silky gravy that clung to each grain of rice, creating a dish that was equal parts comfort and celebration. Families saved this meal for weekends when everyone could gather because patience was essential and conversation flowed while the pot worked its magic. Children sneaked tastes from wooden spoons, drawn by the savory aroma that filled the house from morning until evening. The humble tale, once discarded by butchers, became a centerpiece of pride and ingenuity. Today, rising prices and faster cooking habits mean fewer people take the time to coax such tenderness from a simple cut of beef, but those who remember the meal speak of it as a perfect union of thrift, skill, and the slow rhythm of family life. Sweet potato bites topped with mini marshmallows were dessert-like appetizers that blurred the line between side dish and treat, their orange flesh and white topping creating visual appeal that drew children like magnets before dinner was served. Mothers would bake sweet potatoes until soft, then scoop out the flesh and mash it with butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and vanilla extract until smooth and creamy. The sweetened sweet potato mixture was spooned into mini muffin tins or shaped into small balls and placed on baking sheets, each one topped with a single mini marshmallow that would toast golden brown. As they baked, the marshmallows puffed up and turned golden, creating that characteristic toasted flavor that children associated with campfires and summer fun. In the 1970s Black households, these bites represented creativity, taking traditional candied yams and reimagining them as finger foods children could grab. Brown sugar ham glaze was the kind of Christmas magic children could smell from the porch before they even stepped inside, a scent so sweet and warm it felt like the holiday had finally arrived. Mothers made the glaze from pantry ingredients they trusted, stirring brown sugar, butter, cinnamon, and a little mustard until it bubbled into a thick, glossy syrup. When it coated the ham, it melted into every crease and crack, turning the surface sticky and caramel-colored. Children hovered nearby, pretending to help, but really waiting for the chance to sneak a fingertip across the edge of the pan when no one was looking. The glaze tasted like deep sweetness mixed with spice, a flavor that lived somewhere between candy and tradition. Even families who could not afford a big ham sometimes bought a single slice just so they could have the glaze, because the glaze alone felt like a whole celebration. It was the part of Christmas dinner children talked about the most, the flavor they waited 12 long months for, and the one they compared every other holiday dish to. In many homes, the glaze was made the exact same way every year, passed down quietly through memory, not written recipes. Brown sugar ham glaze tasted like warmth, celebration, and the promise that Christmas had truly begun. Stewed chicken gizzards were one of the most economical meals mothers turned to when they needed something hearty but inexpensive. Gizzards were sold in small bags for almost nothing. Tough at first, but full of flavor when given time, mothers cleaned them thoroughly, then simmered them with onions, celery, and broth until they softened into tender bites. The stew thickened slowly, filling the air with rich aromas that signaled dinner was near. Sometimes mothers added a little flour to make a thicker gravy, perfect for spooning over rice or mashed potatoes. Children often stared curiously at the gizzards, unsure at first, but one taste of the silky gravy and tender meat changed minds quickly. The dish was warming, comforting, and surprisingly filling. Stewed chicken gizzards turned one of the most overlooked cuts into a bowl of nourishment that kept families steady through long weeks. Field pea salad with hot pepper vinegar offered a cool bite for the hottest southern evenings. Tender field peas were boiled until just soft, then chilled and tossed with diced onions, sweet peppers, and a splash of sharp vinegar infused with fiery peppers. The salad balanced earthy legumes with a bright tang that woke the palate after long days in the sun. Served on wide porches as cicadas sang, it accompanied fried chicken, grilled fish, or simply a hunk of cornbread. Home gardeners prized field peas for their reliability in poor soil, and the vinegar peppers were often homemade, steeped for weeks in glass bottles on sunny windowsills. Guests at summer suppers remembered the sting of the vinegar and the gentle sweetness of the peas as the taste of true Southern hospitality. Today, packaged beans and bottled dressings have replaced the careful soaking and seasoning that once defined the dish, but the memory of its crisp, refreshing bite lingers in kitchens where tradition still holds strong. Pigs in blankets made with cocktail franks wrapped in crescent roll dough emerged from ovens as perfect little packages that children ate by the handful, their small size making them perfect for young appetites and hands that grabbed multiple pieces at once. Mothers would unroll refrigerated crescent dough, separating it along the perforations before cutting each triangle in half to create smaller pieces that wrapped around cocktail-sized hot dogs snugly. The wrapped franks were arranged on baking sheets with the dough seam facing down, sometimes brushed with melted butter or beaten egg for extra golden color. As they baked, the dough puffed up and turned flaky and golden, while the franks inside steamed and stayed juicy, creating combinations of textures that made every bite satisfying. In the 1970s, Black households, pigs in blankets represented quick, crowd-pleasing appetizers. Children loved them because they were perfectly sized for little hands. Candied yams cooked in brown sugar were the dish children ran to first, the sweet side that tasted like warm caramel and childhood joy. Mothers sliced the yams thick and simmered them with butter, sugar, and cinnamon until the syrup turned deep and sticky, coating each piece like glossy amber. The smell drifted through the house like a promise of the holiday to come, wrapping everything in warmth. Every bite was tender, sweet, and rich enough to feel like dessert before dessert, the flavor sinking into the soft flesh of the yams. Children often tried to sneak a piece straight from the pan, burning their tongues but smiling anyway. This dish tasted like Christmas comfort, tradition, and sweetness, wrapped in the memory of families who made magic from simple ingredients. Chicken feet soup was a frugal dish that offered surprising nourishment. Chicken feet were inexpensive because most people overlooked them, but mothers in the 1960s knew they held deep flavor and gelatin. After cleaning them carefully, mothers simmered the feet with onions, celery, carrots, and seasoning until the broth became rich and silky. Sometimes a bay leaf or clove of garlic was added when available, creating a broth that tasted far more luxurious than its cost suggested. The feet released their collagen into the soup, giving it a thickness that warmed the body from the inside out. Bits of vegetables broke down, adding more substance to the pot. Served with rice or bread, it became a filling meal for a large family. Children might have eyed the chicken feet with curiosity, but once they tasted the broth, they understood why the dish was cherished. The richness of the soup made everyone feel full and cared for. Chicken feet soup turned the least expensive parts into nourishment. Okra and tomato succotash brought color and heritage together in one bubbling skillet. Fresh okra pods, sliced thin, mingled with sweet ripe tomatoes, corn kernels, onions, and peppers, creating a medley that linked West African traditions with Native American harvests. The dish simmered until the vegetables melded into a savory stew, thickened naturally by the okra's silken texture. Farmers' markets once overflowed with the ingredients every late summer, and families counted on succotash to stretch their crops and fill their tables. It was a side dish that could stand as a main course when meat was scarce, and its bright flavors paired beautifully with cornbread or rice. Elders told stories of ancestors who carried seeds and memories across oceans and frontiers, weaving history into every spoonful. Though many still grow okra and corn, the slow, careful preparation of true succotash has become rare, replaced by frozen blends and quick sautés that cannot match the patient flavor of the old garden skillet. Shrimp cocktail served in small cups with tangy cocktail sauce was elegant finger food that made children feel sophisticated. The cold, tender shrimp dipped in spicy sweet sauce, creating flavors that seemed fancy. Mothers would boil shrimp in seasoned water with Old Bay seasoning, lemon, and bay leaves until they turned pink and curled, then plunge them into ice water to stop the cooking. Once chilled, the shrimp were peeled and deveined, their tails left on for easy handling, then arranged around small cups filled with cocktail sauce made from ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire sauce. The cocktail sauce had a sharp, tangy kick that balanced the shrimp's natural sweetness, creating combinations that felt restaurant quality. In the 1970s, Black households, shrimp cocktail represented luxury and celebration, an appetizer that elevated holiday gatherings. Children loved shrimp cocktail because they could hold the shrimp by the tail and dip them like French fries. Stewed apples with cinnamon were the gentle sweet side that made the entire table smell like Christmas morning. Mothers cooked the apples until they softened, letting butter, sugar, and spices turn them into something warm, tender, and spoon-ready. The scent filled every corner of the house, drifting from the kitchen to the living room and wrapping the whole family in comfort. Children loved them because they tasted like dessert even before dessert was served, soft enough to melt on the tongue and sweet enough to feel special. Some mothers added a splash of lemon, some added nutmeg, but every version felt like warmth in a bowl. Stewed apples tasted like Christmas comfort home and the quiet sweetness that made the holiday feel whole. Sautéed chicken livers with peppers were a deeply flavored dish made from one of the cheapest proteins available. Chicken livers cooked quickly, absorbing the flavor of onions and bell peppers sautéed in a little grease. The mixture became rich, savory, and slightly sweet from the vegetables. Mothers served it over rice or with bread to balance the intensity of the liver. Kids learned to appreciate the dish over time, especially once they tasted how tender the livers became when cooked right. It was a meal that proved inexpensive ingredients could carry real depth. Mothers relied on this dish often during tight weeks because the livers provided iron and protein without straining the budget. The peppers added color and brightness, making the plate feel more generous. Even those who were unsure at first found themselves reaching for seconds once they understood the warmth behind the flavor. Sautéed chicken livers with peppers were a staple of kitchens that knew how to coax flavor from anything. Hand-pulled taffy candy brought winter nights alive with laughter and sticky hands. Families boiled sorghum or cane syrup with sugar until it reached the perfect glossy stage, then poured the hot mixture onto buttered slabs to cool slightly. Children and adults alike greased their palms and began the rhythmic pulling, stretching the warm candy until it turned light and airy. The kitchen filled with the sweet smell of caramel as ropes of taffy were twisted and cut into bite-sized pieces. It was as much about the gathering as the candy, a shared activity that warmed cold evenings and strengthened family ties. Neighbors might stop by to help, turning the process into a spontaneous party where stories and jokes flowed as freely as the sugary strands. Store-bought sweets eventually replaced the long, careful ritual, but the memory of shining taffy and joyful pulling remains vivid for those who once stood in the glow of a winter stove and felt the magic of homemade candy. Rumaki-wrapped chicken livers and water chestnuts in bacon created sophisticated bites that curious children tried, the crispy bacon exterior making them willing to taste the unfamiliar liver that turned out mild. Aunties would cut chicken livers into bite-sized pieces, marinate them briefly in soy sauce and ginger, then wrap them with water chestnut slices in bacon before securing everything with toothpicks. The bundles were arranged on baking sheets and roasted until the bacon crisped and rendered, the fat keeping the liver moist while adding smoky saltiness that transformed the organ meat into something special. As they cooked, the soy sauce caramelized slightly, creating a sweet savory glaze that coated the bacon. In Black households during the 1970s, rumaki represented culinary adventurousness, recipes borrowed from magazines that brought international flavors to holiday tables. Children who were brave enough to try them discovered that bacon really did make everything better. Buttermilk pound cake was the Christmas dessert that greeted guests before they even stepped fully inside the house, because its warm, sweet smell drifted through every room. Mothers mixed flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and buttermilk with practiced rhythm, creating a batter so thick it barely moved when stirred. The cake baked slowly in a heavy pan, rising into a dense, tender loaf with a golden crust that cracked just slightly along the top. Children hovered near the oven, asking if it was ready yet, even though they knew pound cake took patience. When it finally cooled enough to slice, mothers cut each piece thin so everyone could have a share. The flavor was rich and comforting, sweet without being overwhelming, with the tang of buttermilk giving it a depth that lingered on the tongue. Pound cake was never just dessert, it was a gesture of welcome, love, and holiday generosity. It appeared at Christmas dinners, church gatherings, and visits from neighbors who stopped by to bring good wishes. Mothers knew how long the cake stayed soft, and it often lasted several days, though it rarely survived that long in a house full of children. Even after years passed, people remembered the dense crumb, the warm slices, and the feeling of being handed a piece fresh from the pan. Buttermilk pound cake tasted like Christmas hospitality baked into every bite. Black-eyed peas and stewed tomatoes were an inexpensive pairing that offered both protein and comfort. The peas were simmered first, softening in a pot of water with onions or a scrap of fat for extra flavor. As they cooked, the broth turned creamy and earthy, creating a base that tasted rich even without meat. Stewed tomatoes were added near the end, bringing acidity and sweetness that balanced the earthiness of the peas. Mothers often seasoned it with pepper or garlic powder to deepen the flavor. The mixture was spooned over rice or eaten with cornbread, filling the stomach in a way that felt grounding and complete. Kids liked the bright color and the mild, comforting taste. The dish was warm, reliable, and deeply nourishing. It was a simple meal, but never a disappointing one. Black-eyed peas and stewed tomatoes were survival food with soul. Pickled watermelon rind turned summer scraps into something bright and memorable when waste was never an option. Families peeled the green rinds from sweet watermelons, cut them into strips, and simmered them in a brine of vinegar, sugar, and warm spices until the pieces turned translucent and tender. The finished pickles carried a gentle sweetness with a tart kick that balanced fried fish or smoky barbecued pork. Children often helped pack the jars, laughing as the kitchen filled with the scent of cinnamon and clove. These jars lined pantry shelves and cooled in cellars, ready to brighten winter meals with a taste of summer. For many households, this thrifty condiment was a sign of careful planning and pride in making every harvest last. Today, few people bother to save the rinds, and the recipe hides in old notebooks and fading memories. Yet those who remember speak of the surprising pleasure of that sweet, sour crunch beside a plate of fried catfish. Butter beans cooked with ham hock and served in small cups became hearty appetizers that filled hungry children before dinner, their creamy texture and smoky flavor creating comfort in every spoonful. Grandmothers would simmer dried butter beans with ham hocks, onions, and seasonings for hours until the beans became tender and creamy while absorbing the smoky, salty flavor from the meat. The finished beans were served in small portions in cups or bowls with small spoons, allowing guests to enjoy them without needing plates. Some families topped the beans with crumbled cornbread or a drizzle of hot sauce for extra flavor and texture. In Black households during the 1970s, Butter beans represented soul food tradition brought to the appetizer table, showing that holiday food could honor heritage while fitting modern entertaining formats. Children loved butter beans because they tasted familiar and comforting, like Thanksgiving dinner in miniature form that warmed them from the inside. Fried red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting was the Christmas showstopper, the dessert that made children gasp when it landed on the table because no other cake looked quite like it. The cake's deep red crumb contrasted beautifully with the thick, tangy white frosting spread across every layer with deliberate care. Mothers made it slowly and proudly, knowing it signaled a special occasion and that every slice would bring wide smiles. The flavor was rich, smooth, and softly cocoa-kissed, the kind of taste that stayed with you long after the plate was empty. It was usually saved for the very end of the day, when everyone settled down for one last bite of sweetness. Red velvet cake tasted like joy, pride, and a Southern Christmas done right, a dessert that felt like celebration in every layer. Brown gravy meatballs with breadcrumb filler were one of the most creative ways mothers stretched a pound of meat. They mixed ground beef with breadcrumbs, onions, eggs, and seasoning, shaping the mixture into small meatballs that browned quickly in a skillet. Sometimes mothers added chopped peppers or leftover rice to stretch the mixture even further. A simple brown gravy was made from drippings, flour, and water, turning the dish into something warm and comforting. The meatballs simmered in the gravy until tender, soaking up flavor. Served over rice or mashed potatoes, the meal felt hearty and rich. Even though most of the volume came from the breadcrumbs, kids loved the soft texture and the savory gravy. The dish filled the air with a warm, familiar scent that promised fullness and calm at the end of a long day. Brown gravy meatballs were a masterclass in stretching ingredients with dignity. Chitlins' holiday feast once marked winter celebrations with an aroma as unforgettable as the labor required to prepare it. Hog intestines were cleaned thoroughly, then simmered for hours with onions, vinegar, and spices until tender. The dish demanded patience and community, often bringing families together for a full day of washing and cooking. Served with hot sauce and cornbread, chitlins carried the history of using every part of the animal, a practice born of necessity during slavery and carried forward as a mark of resilience. Despite the strong scent that filled kitchens and neighborhoods, the feast represented abundance and pride, especially during Christmas and New Year gatherings. Elders spoke of the old days while younger generations learned the careful methods required to make the dish safe and flavorful. In many places, health concerns and changing tastes have pushed chitlins aside, but the tradition still holds a powerful place in memory as a symbol of perseverance and celebration. Macaroni salad with diced vegetables served in small cups was creamy comfort food that children recognized and loved. The familiar pasta combined with mayonnaise, pickles, and vegetables, creating flavors that felt like home. Mothers would cook elbow macaroni until tender, drain it, and rinse with cold water before mixing it with mayonnaise, diced celery, chopped pickles, diced bell peppers, hard-boiled eggs, and seasonings. The salad was chilled for several hours, then served in small portions with spoons. Some families added mustard for tang, others included diced pimentos for color, each version reflecting family preferences. In the 1970s, Black households, macaroni salad represented familiar comfort brought to the appetizer table, showing that holiday food didn't always need to be fancy. Children loved macaroni salad because it tasted familiar and satisfying, like picnic food that reminded them of summer even during cold November. Peach cobbler with thick crust was the bubbling holiday dessert that made every child hover near the oven with wide eyes and impatient feet, drawn in by the sweet smell before they even saw the dish. Mothers poured sweet peaches, fresh canned or frozen, into baking dishes and covered them with a thick, buttery crust that baked into golden, flaky perfection. As it cooked, the syrup bubbled up around the edges, sending a warm, fruity smell through the whole house that felt like Christmas arriving early. When the cobbler came out, children begged for a scoop while it was still steaming, hoping for the corner piece where the crust was crispest. Families gathered around with bowls that warmed their hands, savoring each sweet bite. Peach cobbler tasted like sweetness, comfort, and Christmas joy wrapped in pastry. a dessert that defined holiday evenings. Sardine and onion rice bake was the kind of dinner mothers relied on when groceries had to stretch farther than usual. Sardines were cheap, protein-rich, and often stocked in the pantry for moments just like this. Mothers mixed the sardines with onions, rice, and seasoning, then baked the mixture until it became warm, fragrant, and cohesive. Sometimes a little mustard or pepper was added for depth, turning the dish into something far more flavorful than its humble ingredients suggested. The aroma of onions and fish filled the kitchen, creating a smell children learned to associate with comfort rather than scarcity. As the casserole baked, the rice absorbed the oils from the fish, giving every spoonful a rich, savory taste that felt more expensive than it was. When the dish was pulled from the oven, the rice on top was slightly crisp. The inside tender and flavorful. Kids scooped generous servings onto their plates, surprised by how good a humble can of sardines could taste. It was hearty, salty, and satisfying. Sardine and onion rice bake was a quiet reminder that survival meals could still feel like home. Rabbit and dumplings was the meal that turned a quiet woodland hunt into a hearty family supper when store-bought meat was rare. Hunters brought back rabbits dressed and cleaned, and cooks simmered the lean meat slowly with onions, carrots, and herbs until it fell from the bone. Soft, floured dumplings were dropped into the rich broth, swelling as they absorbed the savory flavor and thickened the stew. The dish fed large households through cold nights, stretching a single rabbit to satisfy many plates. Children learned to roll the dumpling dough while elders told stories of patient mornings in the woods and the respect owed to the animal that provided the meal. The aroma of simmering broth filled cabins and farm kitchens, promising comfort after long days of work. With modern markets providing endless options, few families still prepare rabbit in this old style. Yet those who recall the tender meat and pillowy dumplings speak of a warmth and gratitude that no packaged dinner can ever replace. Which breakfast would you beg your grandmother to make one more time? Drop it in the comments and share your favorite morning memory. Hit like if these breakfasts brought back something powerful, and subscribe so we keep honoring the meals our elders knew by heart.